Hello and welcome to this in-depth analysis of Thoughts in a Garden by Andrew Marvell. I am Sanket Kumar Jha, an assistant professor of English with Lalitna and Mithila University. Before moving to the poem, let us go through the life of Andrew Marvell. Andrew Marvell is a second-generation metaphysical poet. Marvell was born in 1621 in Yorkshire and was brought up in Hull, where his father was a Puritan preacher in the Church of England. In 1633, when he was 12 years old, he gained entry to Trinity College, Cambridge. He published Latin poems on the King and Queen in 1637. The next year, he graduated and won a scholarship. He could have stayed on at Cambridge, but the death of his father in a tragic accident brought him home. He seems to have travelled in Europe during the Civil War, in which he supported the Royalist cause. In 1650, he became a tutor to the daughter of Lord Fairfax, General of the Parliamentary Army. This was a very creative time for Marvell, and most of the poems for which he is now famous were written at this time. During the Commonwealth period, Marvell turned his sympathies and wrote several significant poems praising Oliver Cromwell. Marvell became Latin Secretary to the Commonwealth on Milton's retirement. On the parliamentary elections following Cromwell's death, Marvell was elected Member of Parliament for his old home town of Hull. He represented Hull in Parliament for the rest of his life. He died unmarried in 1678. His miscellaneous poems were published in 1681. Now let us move to the poem. First, we will try a Hindi translation of every stanza and then move on to analyze them. How vainly men themselves amaze to win the palm, the oak or bays, and their incessant labour see, crowned from some single herb or tree, whose short and narrow words they said, does prudently their toils upbraid, while all flowers and all trees do close to weave the garland of repose. So, a literal Hindi translation would be like this. कैसे लोग व्यर्थ में विस्मित होते हैं पाम ओक या बेस जीतने पर और उनका निरंतर लंबा श्रम उन्हें कुछ पत्तियों से बना मुकुट देता है जिसकी छोटी और संकीर्ण छाया विवेकपूर्वक उनके श्रम की खिल्ली उड़ाती है जबकि एक बगीचे में सभी फूल और पेड़ एक साथ आराम की माला बुनते हैं. So, the first stanza begins in a mocking tone. The poet mocks people who work so hard for something so insignificant. Their lifelong incessant work is rewarded with crowns made of some tree leaves. These days, achievers are awarded with gold and silver medals and some title as Padma Shri and Bharat Ratna. In the classical era, achievers in their fields were awarded with a crown made out of the branches and leaves of trees and grass. The palm crown was given for military honors, the oak crown for political or civil honors, and the beige or laurel's crown for poetic honors. However, to make these crowns, branches have to be cut down and therefore their life is shortened. They fade, cut off from their natural source of life. So, amaze here means confuse. Our poet is not impressed by these achievements. He does not praise these men for their hard works. So his use of words like vainly, incessant, that means never-ending, labor, hard work, indicate his negative impression. Again, in line 4, the phrase crowned from some single herb or tree is not meant to sound impressive. Crowns are generally very elaborate and very obviously associated with royalty and power. But the crowns here are made out of some single herb or tree. The speaker is not bothered to figure out what kind of herb or tree it is. It is just some herb and a single herb at that. It seems like our speaker thinks that sounds pretty lame. Further, these crowns are so worthless they cannot offer shade. The short and narrow verged shade of the wreaths upbraid or rebuke the toil and labor of the men who have worn them. The flowers and trees in their natural world are weaving themselves together to create a beautiful, shady environment to relax in. So, the first stanza brings forward the theme of ambition, or rather worldly ambition. This stanza as a whole is mocking workaholics. The poet is wondering why men spend so much time, labor and energy for a crown of leaves that cannot even provide some shade. He is not foolish. He knows that the crowns symbolizes glory, honor, talent and recognition, but he is twisting the tradition in order to prove a point. He wants to say what he hopes has never been said before. This kind of wordplay is a form of wit, and wit is something Andrew Marvell's poetry is known for. The poem is metaphysical because it uses conceits, arguments, allusions, and other metaphysical techniques, but it is romantic in expression because it talks about nature and the poet's personal feelings. Further, it is a classical poem in its form because the stanza, rhythm, rhyme, and diction is in tune with classical poetry. The poem is written in rhymed couplets or iambic tetrameter. That is, there are 4 iambs per line. Now, what is an iamb? It is a pair of syllables in which the first syllable is unstressed and the second one is stressed. Now move on to second stanza. Fair quite have I found thee here, and innocence, thy sister dear, mistaken long I sought you then in busy companies of men. Your sacred plants, if here below, only among the plants will grow. Society is all but rude to this delicious solitude. हिंदी मीनिंग, सुंदर शांति, मैंने आपको यहाँ पाया है और आपकी प्रिय बहन इनोसेंस को भी। मैं गलत था जो लंबे समय तक आपकी तलाश लोगों की भीड़ में करता था। अगर आपके पवित्र पौधे यहाँ पृथ्वी पर उगते हैं तो वे केवल पौधों के बीच बढ़ते हैं। समाज तो बस असभ्य है इस सुरम्य एकांत के आनंद से। In stanza 2, we learn that the poet has found fair quite and her sister Innocence here. By here, he wants to suggest that he is standing or maybe sitting in a garden. So, fair quite and Innocence have been personified. Marvell refers to fair quite as having a sister, Innocence, and therefore personifies the two ideas. It is not an apostrophe because an apostrophe is an address to someone or something who is not there. Fair quite is referred to as being here. Now it appears that the poet is in conversation with fair quite. He compares his life now to what it was when he was trying to gain success in the world among busy companies of men. That society was all but rude. By rude he means uncivilized, so he reverses what we associate with civilization. The pastoral idea is the true civilization. He is not alone in this. We can go back to the Roman poet Horace for such thoughts. Why does he say that fair quite's sacred plants can grow among natural plants only? These lines are based on the Platonic philosophy that all the objects on earth are inferior versions of those in heaven. The poet also suggests that nature is a more suitable place for sacred plants. Human society cannot grow sacred plants of peace and quiet in it. The mention of solitude catches our attention. It emphasizes that if you want to enjoy the pleasure of quiet and innocence, you have to visit the garden alone, without company. Now move on to the third stanza. No white nor red was ever seen so amorous as this lovely green. Fond lovers, cruel as their flame, cut in these trees their mistress's name. Little alas, they know or heed how far these beauties hers exceed. Fair trees, wheresoever your barks I wound, no name shall but your own be found. सफेद रंग या लाल रंग पौधों के प्यारे हरे रंग की सुंदरता की तुलना में कुछ भी नहीं है। प्रेमी युगल जो अपने प्यार की लौ के समान क्रूर होते हैं, पेड़ों की छाल पर अपने प्रिय का नाम अंकित करके अपनी क्रूरता दिखाते हैं। अफसोस, वे जानते कि पौधों की सुंदरता उनके प्रेमी से कितनी अधिक है। जहां तक मेरा संबंध है, हे सुंदर वृक्षों, अगर कभी मैं तुम्हारी छालों को काटता हूं तो वहां कोई दूसरा नाम नहीं रखूंगा, बल्कि केवल तुम्हारा ही नाम होगा। So, this third stanza picks up on sexual passion. Red and white are the colors poets most often used in erotic poetry to describe the lips, teeth, face of ladies or their beloved, but our poet says that the white complexion or the red lips of ladies have never been so amorous as the lovely green colors of the plants. The dictionary defines amorous as showing feeling or related to sexual desire. Further, he says doting lovers are as cruel in their actions as the flame of love which torments them. Flame obviously means the fire of passion. They show their cruelty by carving the names of their sweethearts on the barks of trees. Marvell writes that lovers are cruel as their flame. He is saying the lovers are destroying things in the same way that fire does. Either they don't know or choose to ignore the fact that the beauties of a garden are far more attractive than the beauties of their ladies. Our poet is not so passionate about ladies. He loves trees and will write mango, neem, peepal, oak, etc. Now, are you enjoying this poem? So, now come to stanza 4. When we have run our passion's heat, love hither makes his best retreat. The gods, that mortal beauty chase, still in a tree did end their race. Apollo haunted Daphne so, only that she might laurel grow, and panned it after Syrinx speed, not as a nymph, but for a reed. The Hindi meaning will be like this. जब हम अपने जुनून की गर्मी समाप्त कर लेते हैं, यहाँ सर्वोत्तम वापसी होती है लव की। जिन देवताओं ने नश्वर महिलाओं का पीछा किया, उन्होंने पैरों में ही अपने दौर समाप्त की। अपोलो ने डेफ्ने का पीछा किया ताकि वह लॉरेल के पेड़ में परिवर्तित हो जाए, और पैन ने सिरिंक्स का पीछा किया, इसलिए नहीं क्योंकि वह एक निम्फ थी यानी अप्सरा थी, बल्कि इसलिए क्योंकि वह रीड के पेड़ में बदल जाए। Now analysis. According to the poet, when we have exhausted our desires, love retreats to hither. Here, retreat means to move back and hither means towards this place. Here, it means the garden. So this line has two meanings. First, a lover can withdraw into a garden for rest and refreshment after his desires are exhausted. Or if you think that this love has been personified, then the meaning would be when Cupid, the god of love, is not active among human beings, he withdraws into a garden for relaxation. There is a pun on the word heat. It suggests both romantic heat as well as the heat of a race. There is a metaphor in this stanza which compares the pursuit of love to the running of a race. Marvell invokes classical mythology to support his point. He uses the stories of Apollo and Daphne and Pan and Syrinx as examples. According to Ovid's Metamorphoses, Apollo, the Greek and Roman god of prophecy and music, lusted after a nymph, Daphne. While he was pursuing her, she cried out for help and was turned into a laurel tree. A similar transformation occurred when Pan pursued Syrinx. Pan is a pastoral god who is partly man and partly goat. So Marvell has again shown his wit by twisting the classical myths to show his wit and to prove his point. Now stanza 5. What wondrous life is this I lead, ripe apples drop about my head, the luscious clusters of the vine upon my mouth do crush their wine, the nectarine and curious peach into my hands themselves to reach, stumbling on melons as I pass, ensnared with flowers I fall on glass. So हिंदी मीनिंग, मैं कितना शानदार जीवन जी रहा हूँ, पके हुए सेब मेरे सिर के पास गिर रहे हैं, अंगूर अपने शराब मेरे मुंह में क्रश कर रहे हैं और अमृत जैसे पीच मेरे हाथों में खुद पहुँच रहे हैं। जैसे ही मैं गुजरता हूँ मैं तरबूजों पर लुढ़क कर फूलों में उलझकर घास पर गिर जाता हूँ। So all of a sudden there is a turn of thought. The poet has moved out from the world of myths and philosophies to his reality. This is called a volta. Volta is an Italian word meaning turn, and in poetry it represents the specific place in a poem where the speaker's train of thought shifts or changes abruptly. So stanza 5 is the volta of this poem. Now the poet gives us instances about why nature is so awesome, so bountiful. Here, ripe apples are falling from the trees, grapes are crushing their juices, peaches are rolling into the poet's hands, and there are so many melons that he cannot even find a place to walk. Flowers ensnare his legs and he falls on soft bed of grass. Obviously, this stanza is very rich in sensuousness. This stanza makes the garden a pastoral poem. A pastoral poem is one that presents nature in an idealized and unrealistic form as opposed to describing nature as it actually appears. Here nature is also giving everything for free without any labor. So in a garden, there is no work, only luxury and relaxation. It also reminds us of the Garden of Eden and the fall of man. But the fall of our poet is not a fall in sin and eternal damnation. Rather, it is coming closer to nature. Mark the change in the tone of the poet. Now he is using words of exaltation like wondrous and paradise, while earlier he used words like labor, vainly, etc. Now stanza 6. Meanwhile the mind from pleasureless withdraws into its happiness, the mind that ocean where each kind does straight its own resemblance find, yet it creates, transcending these, far other worlds and other seas, annihilating all that is made to a green thought in a green shade. हिंदी मीनिंग, इस दरमियान मस्तिष्क इन तुच्छ सुखों से खुद को अपने आनंद में समेट लेता है। मस्तिष्क ऐसा महासागर है जिसमें सब कुछ अपने सदृश्य को देख सकते हैं, लेकिन इन सब के पार यह निर्माण करता है बहुत अलग दुनिया और अलग सागर, सभी निर्मित चीज़ों को मिटाकर हरे छाया में हरे विचार. Stanza 6 is the center of the poem and also the site of many interpretations. Its meaning teases us. It seems very clear, and yet when we try to explain it, the meaning suddenly becomes elusive. While the poet is in the luxury of the garden, his mind withdraws into its happiness. He compares the mind to an ocean, so obviously it is a metaphor. But this is not any ordinary comparison. It is an excellent example of metaphysical conceit. The logic behind this mind is ocean conceit has its root in a 17th century philosophy that for every species on land there is a replica in the ocean. Marvell compares the mind to the ocean because the mind has the power to receive, to create, and to annihilate images. Your mind receives an image for every object in the world that your eyes see. For instance, you are watching your mobile and your mind receives an image of this mobile. Hence, the mind is capable of holding all these images of things that exist in the real world. Further, it is also capable of transcending or surpassing this faculty. It has the capacity to imagine and build a world of its own. That is, imagine things that do not exist in real life. For instance, you have never seen but can imagine soul, you can also imagine heaven. Marvell yet again describes another faculty of the mind, that is to annihilate things. So, annihilate here means to delete, and our mind has a capacity to delete images and again create new images. Here, this elaborate conceit indicates towards the joy of meditation. According to Platonic idealism, ideas are far superior to the world of reality. In the conditions of tranquility which the garden affords, the poet is free to annihilate the world of reality and transcend to the world of ideas. Here a green thought in a green seed perhaps refers to original thought about nature that can only occur while the person thinking them is actively in the natural world. So obviously the theme of stanza 6 is the joy of meditation. Now stanza 7. Here at the fountain's sliding foot, or at some fruit tree's mossy root, casting the body's waste aside, my soul into the boughs does glide. There like a bird it sits and sings, then wets and combs its silver wings, until prepared for longer flight, waves in its plumes the various light. हिंदी, यहाँ इस फव्वारे के फिसलन वाले सीढ़ी पर या काई से ढके पैरों के करीब शरीर के बाहरी वस्त्र को त्याग कर मेरी आत्मा पैरों की शाखाओं पर उड़ जाती है। वहाँ एक पक्षी की तरह बैठकर गाती है, फिर अपने उज्जवल पंखों को संवारती है और जब तक एक लंबी उड़ान की तैयारी न हो जाए, अपने पंखों में यह विभिन्न प्रकाश बुनती रहती है। Now analysis. In stanza 7, the poet casts the body's waste aside. Here body's waste means skin. So the poet considers himself not a body but soul, and he is talking about an actual out-of-body experience. Marvell uses another simile to clarify things. His soul is like a bird that glides from the body as the poet watches the slippery foot of the garden fountain, or maybe the mossy roots of the trees. Then it sits on the branches, sings and combs its feathers. The bird is also preparing for a longer flight, maybe for separation from the body, not death but emancipation. This comparison is again an excellent example of a metaphysical conceit. It emphasizes the fact that this is just a preparation for what will come in future. The meditation that the poet did was just a preparation. These brief moments where the soul escapes the body are practiced for the much longer separation between body and soul. Just as a bird needs rest and prepare its wing for a longer migration, so the speaker believes that the soul needs time to prepare itself. The poet is suggesting a mystical experience. The soul appears to escape the body and to be transported up into the trees, where like a bird it sits and sings. Now come to stanza 8. Such was the happy garden state, while man there walked without a mate, after a place so pure and sweet, what other help could yet be meet? But it was beyond a mortal's share to wander solitary there, two paradises it were in one, to live in paradise alone. हिंदी मीनिंग, यही सुखद स्थिति थी उस बगीचे की जब तक मानव वहां अकेले घूमता था। इतनी पवित्र और मधुर स्थान के बाद और उसे किस चीज की जरूरत थी, लेकिन यह मरणशील प्राणियों के भाग्य में नहीं था कि वह अकेले वहां घूम सके। दो स्वर्ग तो एक में समाहित था, स्वर्ग के बगीचे में अकेले रहने में। द टर्म सच वाज that opens this stanza takes us back to the situation described in stanza 7, the soul and the bird thing. The poet says that the Garden of Eden was sweet and pure before Eve came. The speaker cannot imagine why God would have thought it necessary to add anything to his creation after making Adam. This is a direct reference to the Bible. The Genesis verse of the Bible states, "And the Lord God said, It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him an help meet for him." So Marvell is using that verse here. But according to him, it was beyond mortal human beings' share to live in the garden alone. See, his wit to live in the garden of heaven was like living in two paradises. But man threw away that pleasure due to his disobedience of God. So this stanza takes us to the Bible and gives a religious turn to this poem. Now stanza 9. How well the skillful gardener drew of flowers and herbs this dial knew, where from above the milder sun does throw a fragrant zodiac run, and as it works the industrious bee computes its time as well as we. How could such sweet and wholesome hours be reckoned but with herbs and flowers? So हिंदी मीनिंग, माली ने कितनी कुशलता से यह फूलों और जड़ी बूटियों से धूप घड़ी बनाई है, जहाँ ऊपर से सूर्य की मध्यम किरणें सुगंधित राशि चक्र से गुजरती हैं, और जैसे यह कार्य करता है, कड़ी मेहनत करने वाली मधुमक्खियाँ अपने समय की गणना हमारे ही तरह कर सकते हैं। आखिरकार इस तरह के मधुर और संपूर्ण घड़ी को बिना फूलों और जड़ी बूटी को कैसे याद किया जा सकता है। In the last stanza, the poet returns to where he is. He now compares the garden to a sundial made up of plants and flowers. It is another metaphysical conceit. The bees compute their time as well as we. This line brings nature and human closer. The gardener here means both the gardener of the garden where the poet is, or God who is the gardener. The flowers and herbs create a fragrant sundial that tells us the changes of hours as well as changes in seasons. The flowers bloom, grow and fade in the same way as morning, noontime and evening. Here, fragrant zodiac refers to the different flowers and herbs that represent different constellations in the sky. So, here we come to the end of this long poem. Of Marvell's longer lyrics, The Garden is probably the best known and most enjoyed. It has wit and beauty, variety and depth. In stanza 1, the poet depreciates ambition. In second, third and fourth, he goes on to say that far from being ambitious himself, he has long sought innocence and quiet. Those inseparable sisters, he has looked for them for years in great cities. Now he has stumbled on them in the garden where he ought always to have expected them to be. No society is half as civilized as the solitude in a garden. No women are as loving as these trees. Foolish lovers do not understand this, but the God of love does. It is to the garden that Cupid comes to relax when not employed in affairs of the heart. Garden trees and plants were what the ancient gods loved on earth all along. The myths have misrepresented their aim. In stanza 5, Marvell turns back to himself. The richness of the garden he describes anticipates Milton's description of the Eden in his poem Paradise Lost. Stanza 6 is the center of the poem that depicts the power of human mind and meditation. The seventh stanza presents the mystical experiences of the poet. In stanza 8, the poet returns to the thought of the Garden of Eden again, as was suggested in stanza 5. Here he refers to the ideal state as being not after the creation of Eve, but before it, when Adam was solitary. In the last stanza, the poet returns to where he is again, and for the first time he remarks on the clock made out of plants and flowers. As a metaphysical poem, the garden uses conceit, wit, far-fetched images and allusions, as well as a dramatic situation. The romantic myths about god Apollo and Pan and the biblical allusion of Adam's lonely happiness are heterogeneous ideas yoked by violence together, if you remember Dr. Johnson. But these heterogeneous ideas are very much apt to the context of the argument. Thanks for watching so patiently. Thanks again. Subscribe please.